Hey, Cliff, you've been around the corner a few times. Well, how did you get started? You're a little older than me, so I don't remember your beginnings.
Well, I used to listen to the 78 records with Oscar Peterson, Ray Brown, and I was touched by the sound of the bass that what Ray Brown was doing. And of course, I didn't have a bass, and my parents couldn't afford to get one. My father was a preacher, and of course he wanted me to be following his footsteps as being a preacher.
Well, you have kind of, haven't you?
No,
On the music, you certainly preach every night.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh yeah. Wow. I know he'd be glad to hear that. And my mom's sister, she got a hold of me. My mom told her, says, he's just like his father, he's going to be a preacher. And Mom said, hell no. Said, I don't want him to be a preacher. Said, he should be some type of stage star. What? And she used to watch me around the house sing the bass. I didn't have a bass, but I used to doom, 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 doom.
Right.
And so we had this quartet that was in church that sing church songs. And so with the bass parts, they would let me do the bass, and I would go doom, 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 whatever the song was, do the bass part. And I really didn't get a bass until after I left the Korean War and come back home.
That was about what, early 50s?
About 53.
53, yeah.
And I would come home, and we went down, my mom and I caught the bus, went downtown to get a new wardrobe. And the bus stopped in front of the Green's music store, next to where the bus station is now. And they had this gorgeous bass in the window. It was a blonde bass.
A K, I bet.
No, Epiphone.
Epiphone, okay.
And I looked and seen this bass, and I stopped the bus driver, and he had already stopped. He was ready to take off. I said, wait a minute. And I said, go off, Mama. I said, what you doing? He said, I don't have clothes in there. I said, I know it, but I see something I want. And she got off the bus with me. We went inside the music store, and I bought that bass and all the parts to go with it. The bow, the cover, everything that goes with the stand and all that. And we come out of the music store, and my mom said, now how are we going to get this home? I said, we're walking home. I was so proud to carry that bass home. And we went home. But up to that, when I was in town, I always had to borrow somebody's bass.
Right.
And to play. And I could remember after I got the bass, sitting in the M&L, and the cops come in to arrest the bass player for child support. He owed money for child support. He ran out the back door and left his bass standing up, and Kurt Pioneer, he was the saxophone player in charge of the group, he looked over to see me. He said, come on up and play bass, Murphy. That was my first professional gig.
Yeah. Who were some of the early musicians you ran into and played with?
Back then. Jimmy Smith, the organ player.
Oh, really?
Came in town.
Yeah.
And there was a wine joint on Division Street that he was playing there.
I'll be done.
And he was playing upright piano, and he had a attachment that goes on top of the keys, and it sounded like an organ.
Huh.
He had a Leslie speaker and this attachment. They call it organo or something like that. And I asked him, could I sit in with him, and play. And so there sitting with
Oh,
him.
isn't that cool? How long
Yeah.
was he there?
Oh, about a month. Yeah.
Wow.
This is before he got his big name,
Wow.
because the people found him in Philly.
Wow. How about locally? Who did you play with?
Locally,
I know John Mass and some of
John
that,
Mass,
that
yeah,
crowd.
yeah.
Because you kind of grew up with John and,
Right, yeah, we went to the same school.
Jack Walters.
Jack Walters,
Yeah.
Scott
and
High School.
drummer.
I was going to tell you, because see that drummer, Parker, he had a chance to go with, I almost said Gene Parker, but Charlie Parker.
Charlie Parker, yeah.
Yeah, and Cranen, Carlton Cranen.
And the guitarist
And,
that recorded with Charlie Parker.
Right, our
Garrison.
Right,
You worked with Arv.
Right, oh man, we were.
I'm sure Buddy Sullivan, Al
Buddy,
Myers.
oh God, Buddy.
Al
Sullivan.
Myers.
And the way I met Al Myers, he was playing at a place on Jefferson Street called Lindy's Lounge.
Lenny's Lounge?
Lindy's.
Lindy's.
Yeah, the hotel is still there.
Oh.
The music club, but the lounge, he was working in the lounge. And the drummer, I knew him better than I knew Al Myers. And so he says, he invited me to come down one night. He says, because I look like Oscar Peterson with my weight, his big hands. And so one night I was sitting in there close to the bandstand, and the drummer told Garrett, told man up there, what's his name?
Al Myers.
Al Myers.
Yeah.
Told Al Myers. He says, there's Oscar Peterson sitting out there.
That's good.
He looked up and
Yeah.
seen me.
Yeah.
Man. Oh wow! He started.
That's good. That's good.
But I gave it away though. I was laughing so hard, that I couldn't believe it. He would believe it,
Name some of the places that during your career that were in Toledo here that people might not remember that should remember.
Right.
They should be mentioned.
Well, when I come up, there's a band in every bar.
Right. So there are places all over, but there were certain ones that were more jazz bars, don't you think?
All
than others?
It was all jazz.
All
when
jazz.
When I come up,
Yeah.
it was swinging jazz.
Yeah.
Jazz music.
Yeah.
And they were just everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. Any other players you can think of that you have fond memories of that you enjoy playing with locally here? Because I know you played also with national people.
Yeah.
Down to your place, you worked with
Right.
just about everybody.
Right.
But I was thinking mainly locally.
Locally, I'm sure there are a lot of
A lot of cats. You worked with anybody that played. You worked with.
Right.
Right. But I'd like to tell a story about Cliff if I could. You mind if I tell a story?
I don't care.
And I wasn't there. Down where the Toledo Club is, the parking lot, from what I know, was the Trianon Ballroom.
Right.
That was the parking lot,
Right.
an old wooden structure, where hundreds of people would go on a Wednesday night and dance to all the
Right.
great big bands and
Dance
so
music,
forth.
yeah.
Right? Well, across the street then, of course, there were a lot of joints across the street, the Mural Bar being one of them,
Right.
which I played at before it moved over to Phillips Avenue. Anyway, I think, I'm not sure where Cliff was. He might have had a job at the Toledo Club, but he played the first set and they took a break, and the second set he wasn't there. Well, the third set he appeared again and he played the third set. It went on like that all night. He only played every other set. And they go, where the hell's Cliff? Everything. Well, he had double booked himself, and he was working at a place across the street. And so he worked both gigs, collected a check from both places. I know you were known for that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stories about Cliff when he was younger. But that's one that I always thought was very cool. I thought, wow, that guy can work like 2 gigs at once, That's pretty powerful, man.
Gene, what in the hell were you thinking when you walked into the Rusty's and you sing me on the stage?
Oh, wow. I give you a little background on how I came up and how I played, and then I'll get you to that point.
Okay.
All right? My mother was just wild about music. Her her whole side of the family was wild about music. They came through the Depression and they couldn't really afford instruments, but they were self-taught. She didn't play, but my uncle played, which I'll get to in a second. And but back in the 30s, people taught themselves to play unless you were wealthy. Most people couldn't afford an instrument. Most people were looking for a meal.
Right.
I mean, the last thing they thought about is an instrument, right, or lessons. And there was very little published music at the time, even for people. It's probably where all the fake books, illegal fake books came from, from that era. But anyway, not to wander clear back there, my mother would put a stack of 78, she had about 5,000 of them. Wow. Stack of, and she loved saxophone.
Wow.
And she always wanted a saxophonist for a son. There was two of us, Gary, my brother. And anyhow, she put a stack of records on, so I knew nothing else but just one record being played. And she would iron, and she was a homemaker, and she would iron and cook and wash and do all that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, there was just music, just all her waking hours, which was all my waking hours. So, and of course, a lot of saxophone. So I already had heard Georgie Auld and Coleman Hawkins and Buddy Tate and Johnny Hodges and Earl Bostic, and it goes on, Jimmy Dorsey and all the big bands and so forth. I'm not sure she was into jazz as much as she was big bands, and but she did like combos too. She liked swing stuff and so forth. So she played that night and day and really encouraged my brother, this is before my memory, encouraged my brother, who's 6 years older than I, to take saxophone lessons. And he was in the school, and he quit his senior year. He only played because she wanted him to play. And I don't really remember how good he was, but I remember sitting at the bottom of the stairs, and he was practicing upstairs, and wondering, how can he remember that? How does he know where to put his fingers in it? It looks so complicated. And I knew he was reading music, and I thought, God, how would you do? I didn't even read at the time, read English. I was like 4 years old or 5 years old. And I can remember thinking, God, that's neat. And of course, it was just him by himself. There was no band or anything. It was just him honking on the alto saxophone. And I thought, wow, I want to play. So I started bugging my parents, and I wanted to play trombone. It's lucky I do play some trombone now, but it's lucky I didn't because my arm's not long enough to reach some position. So it's probably a blessing that But anyhow, I threw a tantrum because they wouldn't blow. A big-ass tantrum, maybe a few times, that they wouldn't buy me a trombone. And they said, well, there's a saxophone in the attic, and if you want to play it, your brother disappointed us, and we're not going to have you disappoint us now. So they finally, I thought, well, that's a saxophone or nothing. So about seven years of age, I started taking lessons from a girl in high school, went with my brother at high school. I think her name is Marilyn Megram. And I think she played accordion too, and was on Ted Mack Amateur Hour at the time. Wow. And then I stayed with the band director briefly. Then he sent me to Jack Runyon, who had a big band here in town, and I studied with Jack. And I had played just a couple of years, and my mother said if I did well that she'd buy me a new saxophone, and I did well, and she bought me a new saxophone. Went down to Greens, all right, down to Greens, and there was a Buescher 400, and then I said, oh, that's the horn I want. And I think it cost about $450 at the time, which was a lot. So that was early mid-50s or something. So anyhow, my uncle had a basement band. And he played guitar, and my aunt played the keyboard, later on Hammond organ. And the mailman played bass and everything, and the neighbor played drums, and they invited me down. And I went down, and I thought it was Carnegie Hall or something, because I could hardly get through a song. And they were playing music, they were playing tunes, standards, and so forth. I was just knocked out. So they gave me a little tune to work on, and I practiced like hell all week and went back and knocked them out with it. And it didn't take me long to go right around them, because I was practicing like a fiend. I would practice, it wasn't unusual to practice 8-10 hours on a Saturday. My parents actually threatened me if I didn't stop playing. I practiced so much that they would say, if you don't stop playing, we're going to take this away from you, you do this or whatever, you see. And anyway, so all there was baseball and saxophone. Well, then I took from another guy all through high school, worked on clarinet and saxophone. His name was Red Red Langendorfer, who I believe had been with Bunny Berrigan, was an arranger and a pianist. And he taught me an awful lot. He was a really good teacher also. Then I went to a conservatory in Cincinnati for a year. But meanwhile, I bumped around town. Well, I had gotten married at 21, and it was about that time. And I can't say that I was a jazz player. I improvised, but I don't think I was probably very hip, but I was quite correct. I just didn't hang with any jazz people, so I didn't really have that jazz vernacular going. Do you see? I probably improvised more like a big band player, you know, one of the sweet bands or something like that. See? So anyhow, I walked into Rusty's on the old Rusty's at Central and Secor, and I walked in, and I believe you were playing. I think John Mass was playing, and Jimmy Cook was playing. And one of the first things I heard him play, was the first time I'd ever seen him, was I Remember Clifford.
Oh,
they called that.
Yeah.
I had never heard anything like that.
Wow.
Oh my God. You're right. So I looked at you, and you guys were a little older than I am. You're about 11 years older than I am. So you were in your early 30s then, and anyhow, I went like, oh my God, this is just unbelievable. But you were playing tunes that I knew, some of the tunes I knew, and so forth. And I said, geez, I think I could do that. I could go up there and play with them, I think. But I was really, really shy about it, and I never sat in. And then I was playing a place called Someplace Else over in Sylvania, and I was playing with Denny Henman, who was an organist, and I was playing flute. Well, Jimmy Cook had been working on flute at that time, and Jimmy, for those who don't know, was a legend around this area and played trumpet and flugelhorn. It was just amazing player with phrasing and tone and different styles he could play. I mean, that is one of the greatest musicians that had been in town. So anyway, Jimmy Cook walked in with his wife. And I didn't recognize him right away, but he came up and he just fell over me. He said, "Oh my God!" He says, "Your flute playing is just riding on. We got to play together." Well, what I didn't know was Jim Riggs, who turned out to be the saxophone teacher at North Texas State, and he and Jimmy were partners. And he had left to go to teach, and Jimmy didn't have anybody to play with. Well, Jimmy was looking for me for a new partner to play with. 1, 2, Very good. Fene.